trusting people and wanting to know that I'm in a safe situation. I'm not much of a daredevil. My stepdad had his own trauma. Women didn't even have the right to vote in Switzerland.
How did your home environment shape your sense of safety and identity growing up?
Well, I did not feel safe. I was not safe in my home. And when my stepfather joined the family, it was not a safe environment. And so my fight or flight kicked in probably the first time that my stepfather got violent when I was about 9. In a drunken rage, he took the Christmas tree and threw it across the room and threatened to kill all of us. And it took many years for me to realize that my fight or flight had been turned on at 9 years old and was just on, high for my entire life. So I never did feel safe around my stepfather, although I tried often. Another thing that children will do, a therapist was the one that had to help me understand that one way that humans are shaped, a very good way to manipulate humans is through intermittent reinforcement. And so that could come in the term of, having a parent who one day they're threatening to kill you, but then the next day, they're buying a go-kart and you're riding it around in the backyard. You think when you latch on to those moments where everything is calm and you hope for another moment like that. It's the same with gambling, for instance. If you win a little bit of money in gambling, you're hoping to win again. And it's the same with many addictions. You take a snort of cocaine and you get that high and those feelings of pleasure, and the next time you take another hit, you're hoping to feel that same sense of pleasure. So I never did feel safe, and that has affected me my entire life. To this day, now I understand intellectually, but I still grapple with trusting people and wanting to know that I'm in a safe situation. I'm not much of a daredevil. I used to be quite adventurous, but right now I just long for safety, and that's what my central nervous system needs, is a sense of safety. And so I just listen to what my body needs, and that's how you heal, is to listening to what you need.
You're actually right. First and foremost, I know it must have been very frightening for you, when your stepfather threw the Christmas tree across the room. And I was wondering, were your siblings there to help, or everybody was kind of shocked? Your mom, what was going on when that happened?
So by then, my sister was living somewhere else, and it was just my 16-year-old skinny brother who was there and witnessed it. And my stepdad was a huge man. He was a brown belt in karate, and with one fell swoop of his arm, he pinned my brother against the room, and he was like a bulldozer. He pushed my mom into the bathroom, into the bathtub. There was no curtain or anything, and I was just crying and screaming at 9 years old to please, let my mom go, leave my mom alone. And my mother, of course, we would say today, was codependent, but she also, in some ways, kind of knew how to calm him down. And so she just was pleading with him to let us kids go, and that she would call my big sister to come and get us and take us to my aunt and uncle's house. So we were all, of course, very stunned. But what happened and this was on Christmas Eve, by the way. So the next day was Christmas, and when my mother and my sister brought her to come and get us the next day on Christmas, it was just basically my mother saying that he was sorry for what he did, but he never said those words himself. She would say them, and she would say to me, he's a good person even though he drinks, and just focus on his good side. So I was trained to just focus on his good side. And that was basically how the pattern was set, because my mother was codependent on him. And I got the message quite young that if I wanted my mother, that he came along with the package.
So in a nutshell, you were conditioned in your old. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was codependent on my mother, of course, because I was just a child, and she was codependent on my stepdad. So I was definitely conditioned to look on his good side, which he did have. And even until his dying day, it was, I would say he was one of the most complicated and confusing people I had ever met. But what my book really is about, it was my tenacious desire to dig into my family. I call my pretty baby an autopsy of my family, because I peeled apart the layers of intergenerational and childhood trauma. And I eventually got to the bottom of my stepfather's intergenerational trauma after he had died. I mean, I always knew that he had a violent father himself, and that he was kicked out of the house when he was 12 years old. He was a Swiss immigrant living in Wisconsin. They were cheesemakers, and he had to move out of the house when he was 12, live in a farmer's barn, and work for the farmer. So my stepdad had his own trauma, but it wasn't until he died that through a Swiss relative, I learned where his father's trauma came from. And it turns out that the family, when they immigrated from Switzerland, the parents, there were 3 children, 2 older boys and a baby girl. And they left the baby girl in Switzerland. Now you have to understand that women didn't even have the right to vote in Switzerland until 1974. So you can imagine that this was not the mother's decision to leave her baby in Switzerland. And I can only imagine the grief and the rage and the sadness that this woman had, leaving her child in Switzerland. And they did go back to get her, but 9 years later. And at 9 years old, the family that had taken her did not want her to leave, and she did not want to leave either. So that was just one of the secrets that I uncovered in my family, to finally shine a light on intergenerational trauma, which speaks to a lot of immigrant families. A lot of immigrants deal with tremendous pressures of survival that they don't want to talk about. They just want to keep putting one foot in front of the other to survive. So even though I'm not an immigrant myself, I was affected by an immigrant story of intergenerational trauma. And then I also uncovered my mother's own intergenerational trauma to learn. And she was in her 70s before she finally confided in me that she had been sexually assaulted as a child by a neighbor on numerous occasions. And she had never told a soul. So she knew how to keep secrets, and she did. And without, she used to say to me, Wendy, we didn't have Oprah when I was growing up. We didn't talk about our problems. We didn't talk about what happened to us. We just kept going. And that is true. I understand. But it breaks my heart that my mother never had an opportunity to talk to someone about the sexual assault that she had endured. And you don't just forget those things. You don't just pretend they never happened. And so, of course, it affected her whole life. It affected her relationships with men and with her children. And luckily, as I was writing my book, I was also studying the work of all of our leading researchers today, Bessel van der Kolk, and Gabor Mate and Peter Levine. And trauma, I learned that trauma isn't just an external event like my mother being sexually assaulted. It's what happens inside of us. As Dr. Gabor Mate says, the stress literally changes the brain and the body, and especially the central nervous system and the immune system. Trauma does not disappear. It hides in the nervous system. And so anxieties, addictions, depression, rage, chronic illnesses are often the body keeping score, as Bessel van der Kolk puts it. And so I talk about also my mother. I did know before she told me about the sexual assault, I knew that when she was 11 years old, she was bedridden for a year with what is called St. Vitus dance. It's a neurological disorder. And I know deep in my bones that what was happening was she had trauma that was unprocessed, and she was bedridden for an entire year. So that is the body keeping score, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk does.
Thank you so much for that. It's really a very vast topic, but I would keep that for now, and possibly in future conversations we can come back to that. But thank you. And I do agree that trauma is embedded in the body, and that's why sometimes people have rages, autoimmune diseases if not properly treated. Thank you for touching on that.